The Terrifying Night at the Forgotten Theme Park. Bill is an average high school teenager, had a very strong craving for adventure. The feeling of fear and the adrenaline he got from delving into decaying structures fascinated him. One day, a daring plan began to take root in his mind, and it wasn't long before his friends were brought into the idea. Their target, an abandoned theme park that once radiated joy throughout their town. Now just an old relic, the park's decrepit state seemed to beckon them, a call to explore the unknown. Whispers from experienced urban explorers online and snippets of town gossip only fed their curiosity. The tales were too dramatic to dismiss. United by a shared thirst for discovery, they meticulously devised a plan to infiltrate the forsaken park on a moonlit Friday night. Unburdened by the demands of school or the need for elaborate explanations, they set out. The theme park seemed empty, of course, not even a hint of any noticeable security presence, something they took advantage of with relative ease. Maneuvering through the feeble remains of a rusted fence, the friends entered the quiet realm of the theme park. Its ambience gave off a strange blend of eeriness and nostalgia, almost as if I could recognize the smell of the place, casting an unsettling aura over the surroundings. Broken down rides and abandoned concession stands lay like silent specters across the park. Once vibrant hues, meant to capture the attention of joyful attendees, now stood faded and tattered. A hush enveloped the scene, a silence both anticipated and chilling. After all, how could they expect anything different? It was abandoned. The ground beneath their feet seemed to have endured years of neglect, untouched by human presence for a time. With cautious steps, they began to traverse the park's grounds, each footfall kicking up dust and dirt. Prizes, now tarnished and forsaken, sat hauntingly upon forgotten game carts. Signs of what must have been indulgent treats remained, spoiled and abandoned, a testament to the abrupt desertion of this once celebrated place. Unease began to creep into their thoughts, and one of the friends voiced their growing discomfort. "Maybe we should turn back," he suggested. His voice was a wavering reflection of his fear. "This place, something's off about it. Why would everything just be left behind?" Bill playfully elbowed his friend's ribs, a teasing gesture to stop the rising fear. Ignoring the unsettling presence that gnawed at their minds, Bill had an idea, a suggestion that hung in the air like a shadow. Splitting up. It seemed like an adventure-enhancing notion, a way to toughen up his cautious friend. The mere mention of the idea nearly sent the friend bolting for home, his instincts screaming against it. Yet, in a reluctant moment of agreement and peer pressure, the group yielded. So, the idea was to split up, each individual tasked with discovering something spooky to share, and then to meet back here. The concept was simple. Once everyone had regrouped, they would leave this eerie place and share their findings during the walk back home. Stripped of flashlights and no payphones nearby, reliance on trust and patience was important. If you were the first one back, it would be a challenge to wait all alone, thinking of your story and just waiting for the others. If someone got too afraid and left early, then we would all be left sitting there until morning, not knowing our friend had left or worse, gotten injured. With tension-filled nods, the group dissolved and went toward their own interests. One ventured towards the overhanging corridors of the funhouse, its twisted mirrors and distorted passages calling out like an eerie maze. He wanted to see if it was worse at night. Another gravitated towards the towering point of the park's tallest ride, perhaps seeking solace in its height or desiring a vantage point over the grounds. Lastly, the most apprehensive of the trio was left to explore the clown house. A ripple of chills and unease crawled up his spine that perfectly mirrored their sense of foreboding. He did not choose this, but was left with it, as Bill was already walking down the last remaining path. His steps led him toward the water park. Bill wanted to see this area more than anything, and it was the main reason he had set this whole thing up in the first place. Whispers and tales had long swirled around the park, painting it as the center of the park's activity at night. The call of curiosity beckoned him, gnawing at his resolve like a persistent itch that demanded to be scratched. As Bill meandered toward the water park, the sound of rustling leaves in the trees serenaded his steps, amplifying the atmosphere. His gaze roamed over the cobblestone pathways, a testament to the meticulous architecture. The air held a touch of reverence for the park's former grandeur, whispering of a past that had faded into the shadows. Passing under a sign that seemed to be the one he was looking for, Bill's attention was fixated on the scene that unraveled before him. The image of a decaying aquatic paradise greeted him, a substantially sized pool, flanked by sets of slides and punctuated by a couple of worn diving boards. Yet the water park fell short of the massive size he had envisioned. Its diminished scale seemed almost pitiful compared to his expectations. The first noticeable sensation, however, was the scent that clawed at his nose. Stagnation hung in the air, a putrid aroma reminiscent of water long abandoned. Shaking off the initial discomfort, he pressed forward, drawn inexplicably toward the water's edge. His gaze met the water's surface, seeing nothing but a disgusting green slime that cloaked the pool in an unnatural shroud. The water appeared so thick, so utterly lifeless and still that he could walk on it. Not a ripple disturbed the surface. An unexpected swell of frustration surged within Bill. The night had only produced a pleasant midnight stroll. He chastised himself for expecting anything more, for yearning for some inkling of the supernatural in this place. The least he could do was come up with a story for the guys on the walk back. His mind flashed to his troubled friend. "I bet he's seen plenty enough for us both tonight." Bill grumbled about standing and wiping his hands on his jeans. However, his thoughts were abruptly torn away by a chilling discovery. Amidst the stagnant waters and the abandoned diving boards, a figure was present, perched atop the tallest slide. It gazed down upon him. An eerie stillness hung in the air. Paralyzed by a cocktail of dread and disbelief, Bill struggled to rationalize the presence of this person. How long had they been there, and why were they there? In his mind's frantic searching, rational explanations danced like shadows. Each one is even more unlikely than the last. Swallowing his fear, Bill decided that the figure was merely a shadow, a trick played by the dim light that fell over the park. Just because he couldn't see the thing casting the shadow doesn't mean it isn't there. Yet, the question of this figure bore into his mind, an itch that refused to be ignored. As unease crept at his nerves, he felt a need to investigate. There had to be an explanation he wasn't seeing. Could it be one of his companions pulling a prank? With a sense of, "I really shouldn't be doing this right now," Bill inched forward. His steps were heavy, his eyes never coming off of the figure. Giving himself one last pep talk, Bill began climbing to the slide's peak. Dread coats his every step as he scales upward, his eyes locked on the top of the ladder, ever searching for the figure to appear over the edge and stare down at him. Reaching the top, Bill finds an empty perch, confusion replacing his fear. Suddenly, the slide and ladder quake violently, and panic surges through him as something ascends from below with furious speed. Bill's fingers clung to the ladder's rungs, the vibrations of each step causing his grip to loosen. Panic surged through him like an electric current. He couldn't afford to remain on this ladder any longer. He had to reach solid ground. Ignoring the thought of the murky pool that awaited him at the bottom, he focused on the thought of escape. With frantic determination, he propelled himself up, muscles straining against the fear that clawed at his back. Finally, he reached the peak, his breath ragged as he stood at the entrance of the slide. A momentary breath allowed him to survey the unsettling vision below. His eyes widened as he locked onto a surreal sight. A figure, human in form yet hauntingly strange, was crawling up the ladder. Crawling, not climbing, defying gravity as it moved. Its limbs seemed to contort and writhe, disturbingly disjointed, as they propelled it upward. The rungs of the ladder remained untouched. He needed to move. Dread surged anew as Bill realized that this creature was gaining on him. Each passing second narrows the distance between them. Raw instinct fueled his actions. With a surge of energy that only terror could provide, he darted towards the slide's peak. Without a second thought, he hurled himself onto the slide's surface, disregarding the slick grime that coated it. With a shuddering breath, he pushed off, hurtling down the slide's tunnel. The world around him blurred in a whirlwind of darkness. The air rushed past his ears like a haunting whisper, and for a fleeting instant, he felt a sense of freedom from the encroaching horror. The creature's presence seemed to echo behind him, snapping him back to reality. The sound of its movements and wailing punctuated his rapid descent. Determination fueled his arms as he pressed against the slide's surface, urging himself to plunge even faster into the abyss below. The slide released him into the water's grasp, and the transition from slide to pool was abrupt. A sudden shift from confined darkness to suffocating murkiness. Panic surged as he fought against the water's weight, struggling to break through to the surface. Something was wrong. Why did he feel as though the surface was so far away? Was it the thickness of the water? When he finally emerged, gasping for air, a realization settled in. The pool's depth defied reason. His descent down the slide had carried him with such velocity that, by all logic, he should have hit the pool's bottom upon entering. That was the plan anyway. Hit the bottom and kick off with enough force to propel himself upwards towards the edge. But that had not been the case. Time itself seemed to slow as he wiped the water from his eyes. Slowly opening them, he found himself greeted by an eerie tranquility that contradicted the chaotic events that had unfolded. The water's stillness bordered on unnatural. Each ripple is a reflection of the unsettling quiet that shrouded the scene. Anxious eyes darted around, seeking the slide just behind him. His senses honed in on the slide, searching for any sign of movement or sound that would betray the creature's pursuit. Uncertainty filled him, each passing second intensifying another burning question. Was the creature still coming after him down the slide, or had it already submerged and hidden in the depths before he could surface? As his gaze remained locked on the slide, another revelation dawned on him. The pool was now very large. Its edges had transformed, growing to an unthinkable size. What was once a relatively ordinary pool had ballooned into an aquatic expanse that dwarfed any body of water he had ever seen in person. What was this? With every passing heartbeat, the pool's vastness seemed to expand, its unsettling enormity seeping into his mind. Amidst the stillness, an object slowly emerged from the water. Bill kept wide eyes on the object as more broke the surface. First, the supple curve of a woman's forehead, followed by the unnerving intensity of her piercing blue eyes. Fear anchored him in place, rendering him only a witness to this horrifying display. His breath caught as the figure continued to ascend, her form shrouded in the disconcerting calm of the water. Inch by agonizing inch, she emerged. Her ghastly appearance was only encompassed by her presence. Paralyzed by a terror he could scarcely comprehend, Bill could do nothing but watch as the figure came closer. Driven by sheer primal fear, Bill sought to hide beneath the water's surface. His desperate hope was to evade her gaze, obscured by the muck and murk that clung to him. Yet his actions betrayed his presence in the water, his frantic swimming giving him away. There was no escape route, no sanctuary to be found within this aquatic abyss. He pushed his body through the water, his limbs churning against the noxious mixture. Each stroke was a frenzied struggle against the impending doom. He just wanted to get away. As he propelled himself with urgency, a thought slithered into his consciousness. Something else was close in the water with him, a sinister presence that seemed to match his efforts stroke for stroke. The sensation was chillingly palpable, an unsettling notion that he wasn't being pursued, as if instead locked in an eerie race with an entity that reveled in his terror. Time was a blur now. Bill's muscles throbbed with the effort of each desperate stroke, and the burning ache in his limbs intensified. He fought against the weight of his exhaustion, a futile resistance against the pull of his body's limits. As the line between stamina and surrender blurred, he felt himself begin to sink, the water's suffocating embrace claiming him with a relentless grip. Just when Bill had given up and began to sink for good, his friends materialized, pulling him from the clutches of the water's grasp. Their laughter reverberated through the desolation of the abandoned park, a chorus that seems to mock his ordeal. They dismissed his plight as a mere accident, claiming he had tripped and fallen, and now was just upset they had found him on his rear. Frustration surged within Bill, his heart burning with a mix of anger and fear. Yet as he opens his mouth to protest, his words falter. If it was just a slip, then why am I drenched? It's because that pool. An unexpected sight filled his eyes. The water that had once stretched out ominously before him now lay in shallow puddles, the reflection of moonlight rippling across their surfaces. Confusion churns within him, a tempest of doubt and dread. His friend's laughter lingers in the air, taunting him as if it were a manifestation of the very evil that had pursued him. Bill's world blurred into a maelstrom of emotions, caught between the certainties of his terror and the questions that remained. The encounter with the sinister figure has left him profoundly haunted by the experience. He doesn't go swimming, never bathes, and never showers alone. Did he truly escape its clutches, or had he merely exchanged one layer of horror for another?